The world is divided into 4 spheres, each sphere divided among continents and nations. Nations are divided by borders and interests. These interests divide the news. We examine the impact of these divisions on people and power. This is Imaginary Lines. Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Michael Fox. Journalists and muckrakers have historically played an important role in checking the power of governments and corporations. But across the globe, as mainstream media becomes ever more aligned with powerful entities, who's pushing back and calling for real transparency? Spanish communications professor Victor Sampedro says it's the hackers and journalists who are learning their tools. I'll speak with Sampedro about the future of journalism and the role that hackers are playing in demanding accountability, justice, and freedom. But first, let's take a look at media in Latin America. On August 13th, segments of the indigenous movement in Ecuador, together with opposition-aligned trade unions and politicians, staged protests against the government of Rafael Correa. After the sun went down, the demonstrations turned violent. Protesters attacked police with sticks, rocks, poles, and firebombs as they tried to break past a police barricade to reach Quito's Plaza Grande, where a rally of government supporters was being held in front of the presidential palace.
En una democracia, todos tienen derecho a manifestarse, a protestar si se están conculcando sus derechos. Pero ¿qué derechos se están conculcando aquí? Por el contrario, están atentando contra el derecho de las grandes mayorías, al cerrar los carreteros, al amenazar con aislarnos. ¿Por qué? Porque no seguimos lo que ellos dicen, lo que ellos quieren, sus caprichos.
Story after story, media outlets distorted the news, the number of protesters in the march, or downplayed the violence that left over 80 police officers injured. Some news agencies claimed the strike paralyzed public transportation, or insinuated that it was a massive uprising by the country's people, though an overwhelming majority of Ecuadorians rejected the protests. Sure enough, in the days after the opposition protest, there were denunciations of the so-called repression and accusations that President Correa's government is creeping toward dictatorship. If this script sounds familiar, that's because you've heard it before. Any government that dares to challenge the neoliberal order is seen as a threat, and powerful people conspire against it. In past decades, they would have responded with a military coup. These days, powerful individuals and entities know that the people will not tolerate a coup attempt. Instead, these groups turn to smear campaigns in an effort to paint a false picture. Before making assumptions, we should be vigilant to be sure that the news we are receiving is an adequate portrayal of the actual realities on the ground.
Dramatic new turn in a case of the world's top whistleblower.
WikiLeaks.
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 In 2012, we started releasing over 7 million secret documents. We exposed how governments and corporations hired Stratfor to bribe and spy on journalists, activists, and even the victims of the Bhopal disaster.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been in the Ecuadorian embassy in London for more than 3 years in order to avoid extradition to the United States. Chelsea Manning is serving a 35-year sentence for violations of the U.S. Espionage Act for supplying WikiLeaks with thousands of classified U.S. documents. These are just 2 of the individuals on the front line of the fight for transparency and the freedom of information. This role of checking the power of big governments and powerful entities has traditionally been in the hands of muckraking journalists and independent media. And it is what the Spanish communications professor Victor Sampedro calls the fourth power. I recently sat down with Sampedro to discuss his latest book, The Fourth Power Online, the evolution of hacker activism and the future of journalism. Sampedro is professor of public opinion and political communication at the King Juan Carlos University in Madrid, and he's the author of more than 10 books on media, communication, elections, and public opinion. Victor, thank you so much for joining me in Imaginary Lines.
On the contrary, I'm delighted of being here.
As I understand it, the fourth power is a tool to make powerful governments and entities that have something to hide more transparent. But what's the role of Ecuador and the ALBA countries, which are much more aligned with the hacker activists, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, than, say, the powerful nations of the world?
Well, what comes with the Assange affair and also the Snowden case, what comes clear is that digital revolution is taking place by those digital natives who consider internet as their space. I mean, it's cool to listen to Snowden to say that he's not fighting for real big ideas, he's fighting for his home. And he doesn't allow anyone to enter into his home without permission. And he was not in internet, he was born in internet, that is what he says.
This is about a trend in the relationship between the governing and the governed in America that is coming increasingly into conflict with what we expect as a free and democratic people. If we can't understand the policies and programs of our government, we cannot grant our consent in regulating them.
It's so cool to see that this new generation of activists are reclaiming now and are performing exactly the same roles as the in the illustration in the you know after the printing was established I mean the liberal revolutions of the 19th, 18th century. And we are witnessing something very similar. What happened with the printing technology is happening now with digital technology. The communities that arose with printing press are communities which are now giving new horizons, new lines of future, no, of development. The radicals there are our radicals now. I mean, it's the same. And they are pushing further and further the limits of the established discourses and established institutions, asking, and how happened also in the 18th century revolutions, asking for participation and asking for responsive political entities who are subjected to political punishment. Okay, and that's what they have done. That is what these people really represent. And when you see who are the ideologies who help them, who are the countries, you only see Latin America and precisely the axis of Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador. That's very clear, but also the other two countries of the ALBA.
In an interview last year, you said that the journalist of the future has to be a combination of a hacker and a DJ. That's an interesting analogy. Describe what you mean by this.
On one hand, you have to get the hacker ethics and the hacker tools, as I said before. I mean, you have to work not for living, but your life has to be your work. I mean, it's not journalism is a labor for brave people, for courageous people. Okay, I mean, there are many other forms of earning life and earning money, easier and more comfortable. I mean, if you decide to be a journalist, you have to be all the time trying to be what I said before, a counter power pole. I mean, someone who stands there for the rights of the community, that gives the confidence to you, okay? And that's being a hacker nowadays, okay? A good hacker. And also being very, very careful and very keen and very courageous in shielding digital rights. I mean, if we lose digital rights, we lose our capacity of performing any political role in this century. Okay, that's one thing, and you have to be also like the hackers. Okay, you have to be an activist of nothing but transparency. Okay, that's the thing. I mean, it's not. Evil will suffer a serious damage if you make it transparent. Okay, and that is what you can be. Also, you can have your ideologies, of course, and you can have your own issue agendas, and your priorities, okay? But the first thing is to be an activist of digital rights and transparency, okay? And for the right of participatory politics, okay? Participatory regimes in very different kinds of democracies. Because democracy will survive, that's my opinion, not mine also, in the 20th century, 21st century, in different forms, okay? With different modulations of representative, participatory, and direct democracy, okay? And this country, Ecuador, and Venezuela, and Bolivia, are very good examples of how this is already a reality, okay? The second thing is to being a curator, a good curator, like DJs are. I mean, DJs build their own tunes and their own music by mixing the best music they ever heard. And also, they play, that was, the hacker was the rational side, okay? This is the motive. What does a good DJ? Getting popular music, things that are already done, that people already know, and get the best of it, either the beat or this other side, and you have to be like the DJs, maximum respect for the public, okay? And you have to follow the public until you get them into a communion, because communication comes from there, from community and community.
We gotta make things leak so we can get much bolder. You're the light that the world's demanding. Make it bright and make things clear. We're not gonna sit in.
So both things can revitalize this profession, and this mix can be very fun and also very, very productive, because I'm positive. I mean, good investigative journalism fighting for the citizens' rights, and good emotional content that creates and sustains community and follows this community until keeps them all together around certain common values is what journalism is called to be and to perform.
Victor, I really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for joining me on Imaginary Lines.
Thank you to you, and I'm the honored.
And now for another media analysis. What would happen in your country if you took to the streets and called for the military to oust your head of state? Or if you carried a sign that suggested that the president commit suicide? This is precisely what happened in Brazil on August 16th. Yet most outlets gave scant attention to these worrisome calls, made not by some fringe group, but by many of the principal organizers and participants of the rallies. Perhaps the most glaring omission by the media in covering these protests against President Dilma Rousseff is who was actually marching. Those participating came overwhelmingly from middle and upper classes, upset by more than 12 years of Workers' Party governments and poverty alleviation programs. Many are affiliated with Tea Party-style online groups in Brazil, which champion Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and support free market policies. Reuters' coverage over the marches argued that the poor had turned on Rousseff, yet evidence of this was not seen on the streets of Brazil. Conservative media and Rousseff's opponents have pushed hard to tie her and former President Lula da Silva to the ongoing corruption scandal involving the state oil company Petrobras, though no links have ever been established. Some of the Workers' Party has been implicated, but so have members of all the other major parties. The president's ouster through military force or impeachment looks unlikely at this point, and those conspiring against her know this. The reality is that these protests are as much about Rousseff as they are about the next round of elections in 2008. The reality is that these protests are as much about Rousseff as they are about the next round of elections in 2018, where former President Lula is expected to run again. Those opposed to the Workers' Party hope to see the return of the pro-market, pro-business policies of the past. And that's it for today's program. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Michael Fox. Please join me next week.